When choosing who to be your executor when making a will, it's quite a crucial decision, and you need to make sure that the person you choose can manage your estate properly and they can manage your estate in accordance with your wishes. So there's certain attributes that executor needs to be. One of them is trustworthiness. You need to make sure that you pick someone that you can trust to look after your estate in accordance with your wishes. The next is organisational skills. There will be a lot of things that they need to deal with, so you need to make sure that they can organise this in a methodical manner and be able to deal with it in accordance with what is in your will. You need to be impartial, so we need to make sure that somebody can deal with complex issues that may come up in your estate. For instance, if there's family dynamics and they need to step away from that and deal with it and make sure that your will is followed in accordance with your wishes. They need to be willing and able, so they need to make sure that they have the time to deal with your estate, because sometimes this task can be quite onerous, especially if you have a lot in your estate. So they need to make sure that they can put the time aside to actually deal with this and be willing to deal with it at the same time. You need to make sure that your executor is of the right age and health. As there's a lot to deal with in your estate, you want to make sure that they can deal with any complex things that come up, and they also need to be in good health to be able to take on any onerous tasks that they may need to. Something else that you may want to consider is if you want to employ someone that's a professional. Now, you may have a lot in your estate and it may be complex that a family member may not want to take on, and that's where you may need to get professional help, and that they can be an executor instead of a family member or a friend. Sometimes your estate might be quite complex, so you might want to consider having a professional to be your executor. This professional can obviously help manage that complex estate, whereas a family member may not want to take on that task. So the duties of an executor can be a number of things. And now the first one is for them to locate a will. So it's a good idea to tell them where your will's kept so they can find it when they need to. The next one is actually obtaining a death certificate. Sometimes this can be quite difficult and onerous, but they will need to make sure that they apply to the right place to get that death certificate to deal with your estate. So your executor will need to make sure that they protect your assets. So you may have a number of bank accounts, shares, bonds that they will need to look after. But they also need to safeguard these, because these will need to be distributed to your beneficiaries. A couple of important things for an executor is to make sure that they pay all your debts off. They may actually need to put out a notice to any creditors in case there's anybody that nobody's aware of that you actually owe money to. Aside from this, they also need to make sure they pay all your taxes, because these two are quite onerous duties upon an executor that they need to legally carry out. An executor will need to make sure that they distribute your assets in accordance with the terms of your will, and that they do this correctly. They will also need to make sure that they comply with their fiduciary duty. Well, what this means is to make sure there's no conflict of interest in anything that they are doing, and that they manage your estate in accordance with what you put in your will. Something that your executor might want to be aware of is that they may need to handle disputes. So if there is some family dynamics that's complex, somebody could come and make a claim against your estate. So your executor might need to be aware that this could happen, which then could result in court orders. So if any court orders do come in, your executor needs to know that they need to comply with these. So choosing your executor is quite an important decision. You need to make sure that your executor knows the duties that they need to comply with, so they're not negligent or they don't do anything that's not in accordance with your wishes.